Welcome to Jake versus the Internet. I'm the titular Jake. Let's see if the background music is too loud. This appears to be the Internet. Give me some feedback, though. Can you hear me over this talking? I'm going to pull it down and ask again. How's that for sound? Is that good? I can't hear my own voice. I can only hear the very, very quiet music. I'm awfully orange for this, but I think we just got to deal with that. Because I cannot adjust the camera on the fly. Sound is good, says Amanda Patton. Well, thank you so much, Amanda. I have thieved my background for this one. We're trying in landscape view, the view that is more likely to attract leftists. Why? I have no idea. It just seems to be the preference of various communities. It is time for a haircut. It's been time for a haircut. I can only apologize for the mop of my balding pate that I have presented to you. All I can tell you is I keep intending to go out and get a haircut, and I don't. I always wind up doing something else. All right, gang. I just want to hang out with y'all tonight, test out a new streaming setup. Perhaps raid our good friend Pep Talks later. Kvetch about the political movement most of us, I assume, are a part of, and yet has had goose egg success, except for minor victories of late. What's wrong with us? That's what I want to figure out this time around. Donald James X, hello! Good to see you, my friend. He was just playing live music. I was listening to that while I sat up. Fun fact. I was trying to figure out what is going on with my audio. How come I can hear Donald James X, but I can't? It's not like synced up. And I was using your stream to set up this stream, but I forgot I had the earbuds under the headphones. And I was listening to you on my phone. Gotta keep an eye on dinner, but I'm here. Fair enough. We also have Groove Dragon lurking. Good to see you. Amanda Patton, always great to see you, my friend. December 76, good to see you. What's wrong with progressives? Let's figure it out. Let's solve the whole political movement, the problems with it, in one sitting. I think we can handle it. I think we're cut out for fixing this. King couldn't really, Bernie couldn't, but we're gonna handle it. Boy, am I awfully red. I think I do have to try to fix it. I have to try. Maybe just a little less saturation. Not if we want the green screen. Okay, a little more, a little less. We'll just. You know what? We're just going to call it good. Because the neat thing about leftists is that looks don't really matter all that much, even though we happen to be the most gorgeous political faction out there. That really is rough. That seems to have done it. Okay. Would you believe I did this professionally? But see, I wasn't in front of the camera when I was setting it up. It's much easier when you're not also in front of the thing. Oh, one day I'll con some youth into doing the in front of the camera part for a very small amount of money, and thus continue the cycle of financial abuse. Donald James X says, Looney had a good stream earlier. I saw it. I saw his Friday stream. TMR background. Yes, sir. If you're going to copy from the best. Oh, that is just right in the eyeballs, though. I don't care for that. Oh, well. Well, we're just going to deal with this. Questions I have for you. Let's create a banner. I want to do a new style. Questions I have for you is, how did we get here? Why is it that whenever people are polled, progressive desires, progressive policies, and proposed legislation is extraordinarily popular? Whole country wants the same things progressives want. When it comes time to put somebody in office who will deliver those things, the country almost never goes for progressives. Why is that? I have a theory. In fact, we're just gonna make this the banner. Why doesn't every county vote progressive? Let's see if this looks good. Why doesn't every county vote for progressives? I am asking the question because, as stated in the beginning, bears restating, the actual policies progressives are trying to support. I'm just going to have to deal with it. The actual policies progressives are trying to support are incredibly popular. And yet, our organization doesn't get them achieved. Nobody wants to vote for the people that want the policies that everybody wants. So why? Why is this? I can offer some theories. Theory one, people are lying about what we support. Now, you would think all we would have to do with progressive candidates is get up in front of a microphone and say, no, this is what I support. But it does go deeper than that. They find the phrases we use to describe the things we are trying to do. They beat us to the punch with those phrases, and they redefine them ahead of time. So, for example, if we are saying that we care about what's the most basic one, the trans rights, let's just say that was a phrase that we were using, trans rights, we care about the rights of trans people, because they're people. So it's just human rights that also apply to trans people. That's it's a pretty straightforward thing. Once upon a time, basically everybody agreed with that statement. Yes, trans rights are human rights, and there's, of course. But we got beat to the punch with defining it. And Fox News would have their audience believe that trans rights somehow means straight people oppression. That is what we have been lied to about. That for some reason, not assaulting trans people, not banning people who are trans from receiving medication, will equal your children getting indoctrinated. So when it comes time to put the candidate in office with a progressive policy, they're not selecting a candidate based on whether or not they think trans people should have the same human rights that everybody else has. They're basing their decision on whether or not they want their kid indoctrinated. Now, that might seem nonsensical. I think it is. But I can't deny the results of the past elections. There should be no conservative in office anywhere in America. Nothing, nothing that they are for when it comes to actual policy is something that the people demanded. It is, if there's any support to something a conservative politician is pitching, it is because first the conservatives pitched it, then they washed it through Fox News over and over and over and over again. And they washed it through the idea, they laundered it through 1,000 paid online conservative hosts. And then their voters start supporting it. But it's not ground up. It's not grassroots anything that they're talking about supporting. Oh, all right. We got a comment about the attractive members of the left. If the right wing asked me for who on the left is most attractive, I would put Cardi B and Jake on top of the list. Fair enough. Fair enough. Going low to sky, obviously. No offense to Ms. B, but I mean, come on. This drunk's beard and splotchy skin and balding floppy hair doesn't just happen. You got to work for this. Oh, this looks like Carlos's. Look, we're all just ripping off the Majority Report. This is a background for people who know what's up. I'm using it for the time being just to reassure, because I've said some things of late that I understand why they might make you nervous. And I'm going horizontal this time around to chat with y'all this time, the progressives, more likely than not. I want to give people who know what's up, who are familiar with this background. Not everybody on our side of the aisle will be, but the people who know will instantly say, okay, I know what the slant is here. But I'm going horizontal to talk to you about how I have been talking to right wingers and to encourage you to try something. I can't tell you it'll work. Let's put the banner down for a moment. Well, it relates to the banner. When I was talking with some of these folks, you guys were pitching in helpfully some of the correct answers to the things that were being said. For example, I don't know if this is one thing that was said, but let's just say we were talking about deportations, and the person mentions needing to get rid of the violent criminals. And then somebody in the audience said something along the lines of, actually, the people who are here, even here illegally, but immigrants in general, have much less violent crime than the regular than the rest of the population. Here's the thing. I know. And I know you know. And we've been down this road 1,000 times. I mean, sincerely, think about how many times we've corrected not just people who vote the same way, but the same people on the same topics over and over and over again. I mean, we are constantly dealing with this, which tells me that the information is not where the problem is. It is a problem that they're not agreeing with like the basic facts, as in not a thing we were debating what is real and not, but what to do about it. The problem lies somewhere before that, and I just don't know where it is. I'm trying to find it. That's what this version of the show is all about. It just trying to find out, all right, why is it who told you that immigrants were dangerous? Myself and the lefty crew, we know they are not. As in, we've looked it up many times. We've looked it up live. We've done shows about it. Lovely Sam Cedars talked about it multiple times. So we all know that. And they have had plenty of opportunities to get corrected. But when we tell them that, nothing happens. When we tell them that, for some reason, having the new information does not change their minds. And they don't think about the implications either. If I was lied to about this thing, if I was convinced to allow people to get assaulted by masked men with no ID, if I was that desperate to solve a problem that I was willing to toss out anything I called a moral beforehand, anything I called one of my principles beforehand, like, for example, we should not support a heavy-handed government that assaults the population that it's in charge of protecting. If I was willing to do that over information that turned out to be untrue, who got me all wound up? Who lied to me? What else do I believe that's not true? That which you and I assume would ask ourselves, does not get asked by the other side. Now, it could be that they simply don't believe us. It could be that they think that the information we're presenting them is somehow tricked. There's something tricky we're doing with it to make it seem like things are the way we think they are. But I just don't think it matters, because we've tried and they're not listening. So we got to get them to a point where they are listening. I don't know how to do that yet. My suggestion for now. Yeah, it is a willful ignorance, says HBX. It is a willful ignorance. Yes. So I want to find out if I want to find out how we create something here, an appeal for this information. How do we get them to search it out? It's the question I have. In fact, I might do a whole broader question than this. Why doesn't every county vote for progressives? Maybe that's a way to approach it, is how is it we are presenting our information? Because right now we're presenting it in a way that makes things worse. At the very least, it doesn't make things better. Donald James brings up a good point. It seems progressives breed in certain areas and cities like California or New York, but if you were born in the Midwest, you might have been raised differently. I mean, I don't know. I'm a case against that. I lived kind of near Detroit when I was a kid, like a suburb of Detroit, like 40 minutes away though. It was firmly in the suburbs, and I don't think yeah, I would say I was raised pretty progressive. I wound up briefly not being. I wound up considering myself a libertarian for about a year, but my morals were firmly, I would say, based in what we would these days call progressive values. Everybody deserves a chance. Well, once upon a time, we just called them American values. Everybody deserves a chance to succeed. Nothing about the circumstances of your birth should affect, should be a detriment to your life. It's not somebody's fault if they're born short or tall or gay or straight, or if they are born into a Muslim family or an atheist family. None of that stuff should matter. It's from the Midwest, and but then again, I can't deny that you're correct about the overall numbers. My family might have been different. I'm sure there's folks in Texas who feel the exact same way, and yet they look at their neighbors and they see the opposite of those morals being pursued. So maybe you're right. Hello, Nina Canadian. Good to see you. Amanda Patton says questions about voting are a bit different than questions about why people don't agree. Gerrymandering, now here we go. Gerrymandering and political manipulation are part of the former, certainly. And we're no different on the progressive side of things. For example, who was I supporting a year ago? Kamala Harris, Joe Biden. I don't agree with them on much of anything politically. If we're talking about domestic business policy, I guess. We really disagree on foreign policy, like to the point where I think they are not Harris, but Biden could be argued to be complicit in war crimes. And yet, I was supporting him. So as Amanda says, questions about voting are different than about why people don't agree. They might agree with us, but they view a path to getting to the things that we all say we want as different. And that's not totally crazy. Something else we have to stop doing is allowing ourselves to become overly angry with MAGA, to become to otherize MAGA voters. I'm not gonna pretend like I'm not the worst of it in this crowd here. In fact, I've had the opportunity to talk to people, and I've ruined the opportunity because I took petty opportunities to insult them. That's not helpful. So we do have to start treating MAGA better, not because they deserve better, but because the people we want to protect don't have time for our petty nonsense. And we also have to acknowledge we could be wrong, and people who vote for MAGA are not necessarily trying to do harm. They might if you have enough lacking in your political education, you could be led to believe that the path to universal health care has less resistance by going far right instead of far left. You'd be wrong, but you could think that. The reason being, there's more not extreme, but radical policies, big changes supported by the far right and the far left. And if you don't really understand what it means to be conservative or liberal, as they would say, but left wing or right wing, then yeah, you might think, yeah, we need somebody who's doing the big changes. I think Democrats are all bullshit and they care about only race and stuff. And Republicans, I guess they only care about business and stuff. And so I want big changes, and it's sort of more related to business. So that's healthcare. So I'm going to go. Do you see what I'm talking about? You guys would think that's not like a nonsensical way to vote, but let's be honest. Most of America thinks like that. Maybe not that specific thing, but they think that little about something so important. That those are the people we have to reach. And I don't mean We have to stop doing what we're currently doing amongst progressives. But that, there's lots of folks doing that, and they're very comfortable doing that. They're very good at talking amongst progressives. Case in point, we haven't had a progressive mass shooter that I'm aware of. If we have had one, they certainly it doesn't happen often. That's a sign that amongst ourselves, we are good at talking politics and arriving at correct answers. But we're terrible with the people that don't follow politics all that closely. And it does need to be. It has to be addressed before the end of this year, end of next year. Pinkerbell says there's a lot. Hey, Pink, there's a lot of people who don't question what they are taught growing up. Now, that's true. And one thing it might help with is if we stop trying to change everything all at once. Do you know what I mean? For example, I've met a lot of progressives who, let's say, you find out Santa isn't real, and then they try to tell you, and by the way, the Tooth Fairy, the Easter Bunny, all of it, all magic, not real. It's too much for some people. I think if you are being asked to give up not only your support of one politician, but your support of an entire political party, and not only that, but your concept of U.S. history, and not only that, but your concept of the very country you live in, but not only that, the way you viewed your parents and your grandparents. It's a lot. And I think we underestimate the laziness of America. It's easier to go on being ignorant than to spend all day recontextualizing everything you've ever experienced. And most people will choose the lazy option. I'm not saying we stop trying to reach them. I'm just saying we get practical about how we reach them, and we don't deal with what ought to be, but rather just what is happening, what is. We all have to caucus with Kamala Harris. Caucus is the word you were looking for. Yes. We have to caucus with her. And that's the point. If we were forced into that, surely we can acknowledge that there's a lot of people, not all necessarily, not most necessarily, but a lot of people who voted for people that we think are the absolute devil, who didn't really want to vote for them. And we can use that. We can say, okay, you didn't want that. Good. That's good to hear. Because we can get you to the things that you did want, that you thought you were getting with this con artist. But you don't need to endure the con. Why doesn't every county vote for progressives? Progressives support the policies people want. Universal health care has majority support in the United States. Universal health care. There's most people believed that gay marriage should pass before it passed. Most people believe in abortion rights. There's tons of people who say they don't, but when you ask, well, if you had an ectopic pregnancy, should you be able to cancel that pregnancy and try again? Most people agree with these things, but they do not vote like it. Nina Canadian says, it feels like the two-party system is a big problem. Loyalty. Young people and non-political people ask their family what party they are. Canadians aren't as committed to a team. Pin in that. We assess what the election platforms represent, what election platforms represent our needs and expectations. Now, I agree with you largely, although I find that in practice, the NDP winds up behaving a lot like our like AOC and such. Like they represent a caucus within the larger left, and they've never had a prime minister. Does it does it functionally change the way things go? Because when I look at and now I'm talking as an ignorant American here, but when I see the way Canada functions, I see basically America. I mean, the same nonsense is happening with fake lefties being the major representatives of the left. And then you have right wingers and extremely far right wingers. And then there is an official sort of wink and nod to progressives in the form of the NDP, but they aren't very powerful. They're certainly more powerful than our progressives. Give me your thoughts, Nina Canadian. It feels like the two parties. Yep. Canadians aren't as committed to a team we assess. Yeah, we talked about that. I try to speak with right-leaning Americans, and they tell me what it means to be American. Set in their ways, stubborn, loyal, and patriotic, committed to the Constitution and the existing amendments. Yeah, they're not, though. That's the trick of it. Ask them if they say that, what in the Constitution they like. Name a thing. Name an amendment other than the second or the first. What about the 19th? Do you like that one? What about the 10th? Ask them, and I bet the answer is I have no idea. Maybe not. I'd love that to be untrue. I'd love what I'm saying to be wrong. But I don't think it is. I think they are committed to the Constitution in the same way they are committed to the Bible. They don't know what it says. They only know what somebody told them that it says. And that somebody told them that it says you have permission to be cruel to people. Here's the list of people you can be cruel to. That's what I think. Now, James X, I grew up Jehovah's Witness. I guess it was just my free-thinking, rebellious nature that made me turn away from it. But I have no animosity for my Jehovah's Witness family. Yeah, there are people for whom I don't want to insult the religion. This is not an insult. I'm just being. It's just an assessment. There are people for whom a very controlling religion, one that insists on being a part of many aspects of your life. There are people for whom that is actually very helpful. And whether or not even it needs to be a religion separately, like they just require structure. And I have seen people like whose lives got together because of I hesitate to call it a religion, not Jehovah's Witness, is a different thing, but what I would describe as a religion and they wouldn't. But like nonetheless, boy, I feel guilty for airing people's personal stuff. I just mean to say I've seen people get their lives together with a very controlling system like that, and it's not all bad, and we end up hearing the bad parts all the time. But rarely would somebody come up to you and report the good parts, you know? 101 level, says Pinkerbell. We have to reach people with issue-specific organizing. I agree. Start from one point of agreement. That's enough. Now, that's a good point. So often we start from where we disagree and then expect it to become a conversation where we agree. Why not start with where we agree? Because we happen to know that on most things that progressives believe, it's just phrased in political language, the opinion of the majority of the country. So start with where we agree and then preserve that agreement and repair that agreement and bolster that agreement, grow that agreement within the conversation. I had some success talking with a MAGA type dude the other day. We were talking to Dirk, and we found that, yeah, We actually agree on a hell of a lot of things, including some of the libertarian assessment, which my assessment at the time was, yeah, libertarianism is a great ideal, and it's an impractical way to say you're going to run a government because it's ultimately about essentially disarming the government as much as possible, and that has to be adversarial. We wound up agreeing on that. Dude was this close to being a filthy commie. But it's merely the interlopers that screw us up, the people that get in between our words, our message, and the ears that would hear it. Donald James X says there's a few red states that codified abortion into their constitution. Absolutely. The reference frame says my riding has been voting liberal for 65 years, so they are pretty committed to their team. I'll bet. Yeah, there's some things I agree with libertarians on. Sure, absolutely. There's things I agree with almost any political organization about, and I don't think we have to. I think it's healthy for us to explore that, including not just what do I agree with them about, but why. Why is it we both agree about this principle and yet we disagree on another? It's worth exploring. Dominico, I didn't question the Tooth Fairy, Santa Claus, or the Easter Bunny growing up. I love that. With you as well, brother man. Why doesn't every county vote for progressives? I think one thing we are lacking is a pitch for every county. I think one thing progressives lack is personalized pitches. We don't really, if you were to talk about what local progressive politics looks like these days, you might actually have an answer. A year ago, nobody could have answered that. What's a local progressive policy? And I know this because I was up here in front of the microphone talking to y'all, asking the same question. What does a local progressive policy look like? Nobody had an answer. And it's not your fault. It's because it was never talked about. Suddenly, with a progressive mayoral campaign in the national spotlight, we do start to have answers. And this is the beginning of a great moment for the United States. Chuck L., good to see you. It seems this space is working as it got me here. Well, phenomenal. I'm delighted to hear that. I'm a fan of this space. Look, Andrea and Matt deserve all credit. Matt keeps giving me credit for this space. It was a notion I had. It was not independently either. It was something we had talked about for a long time. It cannot be stressed enough that there's a huge difference between thinking something's a good idea and actually doing it. And Matt and Andrea actually did it. I'm shocked and delighted that they pulled that off. Anyway, this is a huge time for the country. Massive time. Because we're going to get a chance to see local progressive policies. And other towns are going to see, oh, look, if our people can't afford groceries, we can set the prices at a grocery store if there's a government-run grocery store. If there's a government-run grocery store in town, boy, all the other grocery stores are going to have to consider those prices. Are we competing against a store that doesn't need to make a profit? Well, we better lower our prices. There's 1,000 things you could do for local progressive policies. And I would just encourage us to have a few in our back pocket. if you're talking to a country boy and he's saying, I've never considered ever voting for anything other than the most vicious conservative I can find, ask them what is their internet policy? How fast is your internet? Because it's not profitable for a cable company to run a line out to your property. It's not profitable for any capitalist endeavor to get you speedy internet. So I bet your internet's pretty slow. Now, if you put a progressive mayor in, they can say, if you want to provide internet to all these buildings in the middle of town, you also have to pay to run lines out to the outskirts of town, the people 2 or 3 miles away from the city center, people surrounded by woods. They need the internet too. One might argue more. So yes, there are local progressive policies. Every county should have a progressive policy that is the talk of the town, literally the talk of the town, as in brought up at city council meetings. And when you find people who get in the way of doing those progressive things, you know who the enemy is. If you thought you had a good Democrat running things for you, but they don't want to bring internet out to the outskirts of town, they don't want a government-run grocery store because we all need food. They don't want to put in housing for that is affordable. That's not somebody we need in office. That's a conservative wearing a Democrat's hat, taking up a Democrat's seat. And they've been able to sneak in there because at the local level, we haven't demanded anything progressive. So we don't make homegrown progressives. You don't have to behave like a progressive at home. And then when they rise up, when they go to the next level, state level, we wonder why we don't have any progressive candidates. Well, shit. We don't have anybody who's starting their career progressive. So all we can hope for is conversions down the line. It goes the other way normally. The more power you get, the more conservative you tend to become. Because you personally will be affected by less and less things. Less and less of your decisions will actually affect you or your family. You've been gaining power. But no, we need to start very, very local. Why doesn't every county vote for progressives? I think it's because we don't have local progressive policies, and people have been lying about what progressives stand for. If you disagree, I do encourage you to use the link pinned in the comments. You can call in and we can use mouth words to talk. Chuck L., especially with grocery stores wanting to move to digitally driven surge pricing. Yeah, they're just looking for ways. Anytime they try to change their pricing, it is not to help you. It is always because they see a new way to fuck you over. That is the only reason to do that. Donald James X says, and I had a notion that you, Matt, Andrea, and Sandy just get together and start with left past 10. I mean, it kind of was that, but I cannot tell you enough, like, how out of my league these other three are. Like, I mean, I could go up in front of any president and do a successful interview just because whatever makes somebody a sociopath, I got a little drop of, and I don't get nervous in front of those folks. But in terms of ability to put on a coherent show, are you kidding me? Look at what Sandy does sometimes. She's got like 6 different graphics going at once. She knows what they are and what they say, and when she clicks a button, what it'll do. They're out of my league. The reference frame, pretty fast, as the government made it a priority, even for rural areas here in Quebec. There it is. And points to Nina Canadian from earlier, because look at that. Their system actually gets internet where it needs to go. Now, Canada has a less dense population in every sense of the word. So they also do like the average person is more likely to understand the need for internet as infrastructure, but the point still stands. My God, they got it done. And it wasn't to the benefit of the capitalist class, which means there's something to be said for the way Canada's doing things. And I am not against fundamentally changing the way America works. I would be happy to go to a parliamentary system. I'd be delighted by that. I think that's a fine way to run a government. I do not care for the two-party system, certainly, but we would still have the same fundamental problem. What are the politics of those groups, of the individuals we put in place? Why doesn't every county vote for progressives, not just the blue ones? It's a deeper question than simply why are people not persuaded? Why culturally are we this or that? But it's why doesn't every county acknowledge that progressives are trying to help them? I will take this from the audience. If you are a conservative who's watching, I have a question for you, and I have two questions for you. One is, what do you think progressives' intentions are for you? And two is, what are your intentions for me? And the folks watching here, what are your intentions for progressives? How, if you're a right-winger, hold on. My question is, how are you trying to make life better for the other side? I'll answer it on behalf of progressives, and if you guys think there's a better way to go about this, I'd love your thoughts. But the question is, how are you trying to make life better for the other side? We're going to take a brief break while I attempt to demonstrate that I was correct. Yeah. We're going to take a brief break while I attempt to demonstrate that I was correct about the tech. I guess we're listening to Love Seat by Monarch. Be back in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. The question is, how are you trying to make life better for the other side? Give it some thought, and I will see you on that other side. Great timing, but I looped it. The question is, coming up. There we are. The question is, nope. How are you trying to make life better for the other side? What about your policies? What about your laws? What about the issue set you're recommending will improve the lives of the people who are voting against you, voting in the opposite direction? I can tell you, for progressives, that's easy. We want universal health care for everybody. That includes the people that disagree with us. I don't think that when you are sick, the cost of paying for it should be a concern. And even if you go the capitalist route to try to avoid that in the form of insurance, they will still fight you. They will still try to get out of paying for your bills that they said they would pay for if you agreed to pay them a little bit every month. They'll try to weasel out of it while you are potentially dying. They hope you will die before you resolve whether or not they're able to pay for your treatment. They'd rather you die. That's who they are. That's the current system we have, is somebody rooting for your death who's involved in making it not happen. So that's what I want. As a progressive, I want to make sure that you, person who disagrees with me, person who's probably said that I deserve to be in prison for my political views, I want you to have free healthcare, universal healthcare. And I want your boss to pay for it. In fact, you're not even your boss, but your boss's boss. I want the ultra rich to pay for it. Free healthcare, we could argue the truth of it, which is it would be cheaper overall. You would pay less money, but also the amount of money that needs to be paid to the healthcare industry would be less, because we wouldn't be propping up an entire insurance industry on top of everything else. All those jobs, all those kids going to college, all those cars, all those bills that are paid for by people who work in the insurance industry, not anymore. Nope, they'd have to go find real jobs that don't just suck your health out of your body. That's what I want. So you can agree or disagree over whether or not I'm correct on the assessment. But what I am trying to do is to help the people I disagree with. I'm also trying to help my own folks. Yeah, of course. But everything I'm doing for them also applies to you, other people. If we have somebody on the right wing, I'd love to know, are you trying to help me too? Is that one of your goals, is to help me, or are you only trying to hurt me? If I had to guess, I think based on the impression I get, which is admittedly from within my own bubble, I think you're not trying to help, and I think you're not trying to help, and I think you are looking for ways simply to justify hurting me, hurting my friends, harming other Americans, or just people who are located in America, even if you don't consider them Americans for various reasons. You're trying to harm people, and your policy set, from my perspective, is an excuse for harming people, often phrased in terms of how it preserves your rights. But the rights it preserves are not actual rights, but rather just times you've hurt people. That's what I get. For example, the right to pray in school never means anybody's prayer. Always means only the Christians. So it's not a right to prayer in school, but a right to force your religion on somebody else. And I would point out the case of the Satanist Club that got started in a school after it was declared that it was okay for there to be religious groups in schools. Who protested that Satanist club? Well, it was the very people that had protested for the right to have a religious representation in after school clubs. By the way, I'm okay with there being like an after school Christian club or an after school Muslim club or Satanist club or whatever. If it's a club, I personally am okay with it. But my point still stands. It wasn't the principle of the thing that those folks were all about. So I ask you again, what is the correct answer? I'm just guessing. And I, again, must stress that I'm probably incorrect. I hope I'm wrong, certainly, because I don't have a very high opinion of the other side. I'd like to like half of America more. So correct the record. If not that, what is it you think you are doing? What are you trying to do that will make life better for me and other progressives? Do tell me. How will the changes you make improve life? Ooh, we got some talk here. YouTube censored you. That's weird. Dominico says, why the F do we allow ourselves to live under Republican rule? I can answer that already, but let's go on. You don't know G-Dub Washington. You know G-Dub Washington didn't let that happen with the King of England. So what are we all doing here with Trump? The reason why we let ourselves live under Republican rule is because we lost the election. And that's what we do every year when we get the results of an election, but when we agree to have an election, we are gambling with 4 years of our lives, 4 years of the country's existence. It's a gamble. And ladies and gentlemen, enter into that gamble, the contest really, knowing that the correct thing to do is let the country be run by whoever wins the election. And we lost. There's conspiracies, sure, about the nature of our loss. Certainly, gerrymandering is a huge problem, and Republicans gerrymander the most and the most dishonestly. But none of that changes the fact that we knew this going in. We cannot prove anything, and we lost the election. And so we have to deal with why it was even possible for us to lose. How did we not only lose, but we lost to a candidate who was undergoing prosecution for trying to overthrow the country. We effed that one up. We just did. And it sucks to hear, I know, but it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. It's just what happened. And now we have to deal with it. Because we really cannot afford to lose anymore. We just can't, man. How am I trying to make life better for the other side? Says Pinker Bell. Focusing on labor power, unionization, etc. Pointing the blame upwards at the rich who are making life worse for everyone. So well put, Pink. Well put, my friend. I like this too because you're talking broadly. Because we're gonna have to summarize literally years of political philosophy that we've gotten into. We're gonna have to summarize it, and that's a good summary right there. I would say progressive politics, when described broadly, are anti-rich, not even anti-accumulation of wealth, but anti-stagnation of wealth. Anti-wealth stagnation. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So that money cannot be accumulated and simply rot in a billionaire's vault, but instead, after a certain point, cannot be accumulated. You cannot accumulate as much as these people do. You should not be able to accumulate every year the full wealth of a country. You shouldn't be able to make $40 billion in a year because nobody has ever done $40 billion worth of labor. They just have not. If they are told on paper that this year they achieved $40 billion, they are simply playing a game with numbers. At that point, it does not represent the value of their labor whatsoever. No matter what job they're doing, no matter who they're doing that job for, nobody's ever earned $40 billion except for perhaps Jonas Salk. But even then, 40 billion? I don't think so. So, in answer to how am I trying to make life better for the other side, Pinkerbell, representing the progressives, says focusing on labor power. Yeah, doesn't matter who that labor voted for. We are still trying to give them more power, unionization, etc. Again, we don't care if within the union everybody voted for who we consider to be the bad guy. We still want that union to have power over their own lives. Pointing the blame upwards at the rich who are making life worse for everyone. Agreed. Wholeheartedly agreed on all those points. Folks, take note from what Pink is saying here, because this is a great prescription for how you talk to the other side. We should also frame how we are talking to the other side in this way. How are we trying to help you? Why do we have a superior plan for helping you? Not just why it's important that they stop hurting other people. I have a feeling we'll get there. I have a feeling if you talk with somebody long enough about how you are trying to help them and what you're saying makes sense because you understand it, I have a feeling they'll arrive at their own, at the conclusions that we would like them to understand. I don't think we need to say these things. In fact, I think if we say your people are scamming you, their defenses will go up. Donald James says, so I offer financial relief. That makes sense. Universal health care should be another form of financial relief. Absolutely. I think that's wholeheartedly correct. And I would also add, I think financial relief is a great way to approach things as well. So, for example, anytime a major corporation gets a bailout, every one of its employees should first, and I would argue instead, get a bailout. Let the company collapse because the company got us into this problem. But everybody who works for the company, who's not the CEO, gets a check. So for however much money the company would have gotten to get bailed out, instead we're letting that company crash. Or if we bail out that company, now everybody's a government employee because the government owns that company. We don't bail out. We don't give away free money. We take the thing we bought. We are willing to buy a failing company and nationalize that because apparently it was so important that the government had to bail it out or the people would suffer. Well, if that's the case, then it's too important not to be owned by the people themselves. So absolutely, reconfiguring how we do bailouts. One way to do financial relief. Another way, great way, Donald James X points out, is universal health care. Also, just universal student loan forgiveness. If a company has a bunch of student loans on the books, freeze, all of those are just bought by the government. Government will pay you back 50 cents on the dollar, and that will be that. Pinkerbell says, Jake, I think we can unite the working class under the banner of anti-corruption. And I see really sad news for Pinkerbell. My mom is literally in the hospital dying right now. And I got claim denial in the mail today. Yeah. I'm sorry to put your personal business up on here, but I do want people to understand this is who we're dealing with. These are the predators we're dealing with. She's losing her mother. Pretty much one of the worst experiences a human being has to go through. And some soulless fuckers have gathered around and decided we're going to steal from these people. During this time of heartache, we're going to thieve from these people. They've been giving us money for years. They've been loyal customers. Now they need us to fulfill our end of the bargain. And because we think they are in a weakened state and we can get away with it, we're not going to do what we said we would. And that's the system we've allowed to exist in the United States of America. Are you going to wait till it's you before you act on this? Are you going to wait till it's your mom dying on a hospital bed before we deal with these sons of bitches? Are you going to let Pink suffer unavenged? She's a good person. If you don't know her, let me tell you, they're taking advantage of a good person, of a genuinely sweet soul. And if they will attack Pink in this way, they will attack anyone. Going to set my bills on fire. Don't pay them another cent ever again. They are white-collar criminals. That's all they are. See those motherfuckers in court. Sue the Christ out of them if you can. Chuck L., as someone who had ACA when it was conceived, it was definitely affordable and valuable in the beginning, but now it's far more expensive for less coverage. Universal works for the world. Why not us? It should. It certainly should. How would the other side answer that question? I am going to take a stab at it. I don't believe the things I'm about to say, but I'm going to try to answer that question. If I were a right-winger answering this question, how are you trying to make life better for the other side? I would say, I am trying to make sure that your rights are not infringed upon because you have the ability to defend them physically because you are armed. So the government, under the way I want things to be, the government cannot come in and take things from you or make you do anything because you're armed. You have a gun, and therefore you can hold off the entire U.S. military. I would also say that I'm trying to make sure that the services you receive from the capitalist institutions that you rely upon are good and are of an acceptable quality because these institutions are not required to arbitrarily hire people based upon race. That's what I would say. So I would say that as a right winger, I believe that DEI practices weaken the overall staffing because you don't decide things based on merit. You decide things based on government approved list of candidates. I would also say the easiest one. How are you trying to make life better for the other side? Well, I want you to have lower taxes because I don't think the government does anything good with those taxes. So I think you're better off spending the money yourself on what you see fit. You could make your own community better. If you want a private road outside of your house, if you're sick of the potholes, instead of paying the government to fill in those potholes, which they never do, you can just pay a private company to come fix the potholes outside of your house. That's what I would say. Right wingers, did I get it right? Donald James X, I offer the other side the new economic bill of rights. Hell yeah. This is a guy telling you, man, I'm in the right group. I offer the other side the new economic bill of rights, aka the thing brought to us by Harvey K. That means guaranteed housing, healthcare, and education, forms of financial relief. I mean, I think that right there is the platform. If I were going to say, what is the progressive platform? Right there, DJX. Offering the other side the new economic Bill of Rights, which means guaranteed housing, healthcare, and education. Yeah. I just don't see how anybody, when faced with the reality, can disagree with that. Because guaranteed housing, for example, is not guaranteed luxury housing. It's not a guaranteed patio. It's not even a guaranteed backyard. You're not going to freeze to death in the streets. I talked about this once upon a time, but one of the worst days I've ever had as an adult man, I experienced with you all, and it happened after I gave a homeless person $20. And the thing of it was, I normally keep, this is real, I'm readmitting my shittiness. I normally keep like a couple of dollars in cash on me just so I can hand it out to people who are begging for money. $1. Seems like a nice guy thing to do, but I had to re-examine that. Because my friends and I were walking through a major metropolitan area. It was probably Detroit. I don't recall. We were seeing a concert, like a comedy show, so it must have been Detroit, but whatever. That general area. And it was cold. And it was, in fact, so cold that we were kind of hustling to get to the car. And at first we were telling jokes about, like, haha, isn't it cold? But then we didn't even want to open our mouths and let the heat escape. It was that kind of a Michigan night. And somebody asked me for money. I thought I had just like $1 in my pocket. And I was going to be like, all right, here you go. I didn't have $1. I had a 20. I actually had like $60, something like that. But only in 20s. And because they had already, like, we had made eye contact and I had pulled out my wallet already and my hand was on the bill, what am I going to do? Stop? Like, I don't care that much about you. No, you can't. It's too socially awkward at that point. It wasn't kind. It was just, if anything, it was cowardice. Just socially not wanting to deal with being like, ooh, actually, I don't want to give you 20. So I did. I handed it over. But I consciously thought in that moment, it's so cold. I don't want to be out here even 5 more minutes. This person, it was after the show. So the shelters were closed. You can't get in after a certain time. So this person was going to spend the night in the cold. They might have died that night. I don't know. I had the means in my hand to spare them from that freezing night. And what, $60? How much is a motel? I could have driven them to a motel and bought them the room for the night. But I chose not to. While I was holding the money and looking them in the face, I chose not to. Why? Because I knew socially I would get away. I would get away with it. I've already handed them $20. That's socially freeing me from any consequence. But what difference would it really have made to me in that moment to be down $40 instead of 20 or 60? Who the cares? You work a couple extra hours and you're fine. But that person maybe died that night before they ever could have spent the money. What was it? 5 degrees out, 10 degrees. Not fun to be in. For all I know, they could have died. Because I simply chose that I would rather have $40 extra to maybe spend on something that I frankly did not need and make them endure, even if they lived, still make them endure a night of freezing cold. That's who we are when it's just us thinking selfishly. We don't have to be this way. And if we all work together, we don't even have to give up the 20. We can all give up a tenth of a cent each. And instead of one night, they'll be protected all year round. And every time it gets cold, I won't have to think, I hope they lived. Offering an economic bill of rights that clarifies moments like that on a nationwide scale. Should somebody have to spend the night in the cold just because they don't have enough money? We all know what the answer is. The answer is no. Of course not. Even just flat out no. And since we know that to be true, and we know that you don't let people die of the elements, it then becomes our obligation to make the arrangements. We know the winter is coming. Happy upcoming Halloween, everybody. What follows it is death for a lot of homeless people. We know that's coming. So now that we know it's on the way, what do we do about it? A new economic bill of rights. I think you're spot on. Cannabis, coffee, and cigs too. Well, that I'm happy to offer. Free mental health care. Hell yes. Included in free health care. Absolutely. That's a phenomenal idea. What is it that we are doing to try to make life better for the other side? Dominico, what you can do. Can we please get a bill of lefts? Yeah, a bill of lefts. Never, ever let somebody make a point without nitpicking it. Splitting hairs until you're arguing. Never, ever let that happen. Don't ever have fully functioning audio on a broadcast. It's illegal. Yeah. Groove Dragon, I wholeheartedly agree. Jake, looks like you got a brain trust in this chat room. Very impressive. Yeah, I honestly don't know. I could not do this show if not for, thankfully, my audience. I would just be too nervous about saying something irresponsible because, y'all, if I get something wrong, and I don't mean this. Yeah, I mean, just like if I get something wrong, I am told in the nicest way possible, but I'm not just told that it's wrong. Sources are cited. They know the specific interview I'm referring to, and it's just an awesome dude. There will never be another time quite like this in media, I swear. We doesn't feel like it right now, but we are at the golden age of independent media. Because yeah, people under, I'm going to say like 30 just won't understand. But once upon a time, you did not have feedback like this in real time. And the only way you knew if your show was good or not was like the TV manager, station manager told you. And they were only interpreting the feedback from people who had the time to call into the station. Different era. Donald James X says, this is why I'm more a democratic socialist first. So that if you happen to make some money, you can get yourself a bigger, better house. I still believe in a small form of controlled capitalism. I wholeheartedly agree. I actually believe that we must exit the era of universal formulas for governing. I think more and more I think there is no fully correct system. Communism is not fully correct. Capitalism is not fully correct. Socialism is not fully correct. I don't even really. I could tell you what the definitional difference is between socialism and capitalism. To my knowledge, it focuses on who owns the means of production. One of them is the people in the form of the government, and the other is the workers. I don't actually know what that means. That's where we are. I don't know what that means. I know what the correct answer is. I don't understand it at all. But I also think it doesn't really matter because we don't need a specific label for the machine to work. We just need the machine to work. I don't care if we call it the ice cream machine or the milkshake maker, so long as it makes the specific product that we need made. It can be called whatever. Similarly, I think, yeah, capitalism works great for luxury products. It really does. For like high-end phones, absolutely. Capitalism it up. For luxury homes, yes. If you want to build a house that has like 3 levels and fancy bathrooms that clean your behind in the European fashion, by all means, go ahead. Capitalism does not work very well for universal needs. Not universal wants, but universal needs. Capitalism works great for concerts. It does not work great for food distribution. It does not work great for military endeavors. It does not work great for policing, for emergency services of any kind, including firefighters and hospitals. It does not work well for universal needs. But it works great for luxury things. So I think we should have it around, but refrain what it can affect. Capitalism and markets, says the Mike Stead Show. They aren't the same. I agree. Groove Dragon, I support a kindarchy. Ooh, I dig that. To what I was saying earlier regarding us not being able to sway the other side very much and trying to figure out why that is. I think this question will wind up being crucial. Okay. I think this question will wind up being crucial if we cannot express to our counterparts relatively quickly how we are trying to make their lives better. We will simply find ourselves in an ancient argument that has no end. We'll simply find ourselves debating whose side has more of the people we want to save on it. So it'll go nowhere. Legend of Sean, no mods, anarchy. Well, don't forget, your old pal Jake is the de facto king of the mods. If only because of the way I dress. Hey, gang. I had a lot of fun with y'all tonight. And I might come back. Not unlike Kim Kardashian. Because I'm enjoying this new setup, but I do want to finagle a little bit more. And also, I think Pep Talks is live. So I'm going to go rate him. This has been WYCD Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do. My name's Jake. Up next, we got Pep Talks. But first, we have the WYCD outro played by Donald James A.